Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Frank Remkiewicz, and we're going to be discussing his amazing book, The Bone Stranger. Now, people, listen, it's available for purchase through the Bookstop Literary Agency, or you know what, do yourself a favor and just simply Google search his name, or Google search the term Froggy, because you're going to be greeted with so much, because Frank has been putting in work, okay? This man has so many creations. He has 12 children narratives. Now, of course, today is all about The Bone Stranger. When you're searching for it, you want to make sure to get the newest edition available. But in addition to the 12 children narratives, he's created greeting cards, many illustrations. I mean, this man has put in work, okay? He is an artist through and through. And The Bone Stranger is really just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much for you to get lost in. So make sure to check everything out. And before we go any further, I do want to stop and quickly take this opportunity and point out that Frank was brought to our network by one of the best advertising firms in the business. And you already know, I'm talking about Quipper Prints. So listen to me. If you are a writer out there and you have a book that you've created, although you find yourself at a crossroads because you need help moving it, well, I hope you're sitting down because I'm about to give you a great piece of advice. You want to contact Quipper Prints. They're one of the best in the business to do it. And people, this is what they specialize in, okay? So do yourself a favor. Head on over to quipperprints.com today and gather all of the ways they're going to help maximize your creative endeavors. Now listen, it is a true pleasure, an absolute delight to have Frank here on the line. Now, the moment you start to do research on his book, The Bone Stranger, well, you're going to understand the journey that you and your children are about to embark upon. Now, it's a good classic Wild Wild West story, okay? And right off the bat, it already has me engaged because I grew up a big fan of those franchises, right? It was something that there was just an allure to it, right? You see the little tumbleweeds, blowing around and people coming in there's these old towns. It was just something that captured my imagination as a kid. I loved it. I grew up watching it. This narrative is really depicting that scenario, right? But here's the best part. It's all clean. It's a family fun and a family friendly story. So you don't have to worry about the guns. You don't have to worry about a lot of the nuances that probably weren't children friendly. But listen, you and I, we grew up in a different time. Things were a little different then. But this is a fun, family-friendly story that you're going to love embarking upon with your children. And at the end of the day, don't take my word for it, okay? Frank's written the book. He's done the research. He's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could. But just understand, we're only going to scratch the surface here today. Okay, there's only so much that we're going to be able to cover in a short 20-minute interview. But I promise you, by the time we've concluded, you're going to run to Amazon and Barnes & Noble and purchase your copies because you're going to understand how valuable of a book this is to add to your shelf and how wonderful of a journey this is that your children are going to want to embark upon. A wonderful gift to give to them, an even better gift to give to someone else to add to their shelf. So sit back, strap in, and get ready for a wonderful ride. Frank, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest with us today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Benji. Thanks for the wonderful introduction. And it's interesting to me that you mentioned those funny little towns in the Old West scenarios, because I thought, hey, gee, that's where my book has to take place, in one of those. And on top of that, I think I love books that start with maps. So I'm going to start this one with a map of a dusty little town. And I thought, what should I call it? And I thought, just write Dusty Little Town. And so that's what I did. It's a crossroads where there's a river and the stagecoach route. And that's about all there is in this town, except for a post office, of course, the jail, the general store, the school, horse corral, and the stars of my book work in a delicatessen in the Old West. It's called Boney's, and Boney is the proprietor, and he has a faithful companion. A lot of these Western heroes all had companions and sidekicks.
Yeah.
His faithful companion is a German Shepherd called Wolfgang, who loves to work in the deli too while he's learning to speak English, and he sweeps up and makes the strudel and does the errands that occur around there. And in the opening of the book, you see the interior of the deli, and you see, if you're looking for details, today's specials are listed on a blackboard. It's rattlesnake burger and cactus salad and Buffalo Boy root beer, 25 cents. That was big money in those days.
Absolutely.
Oh, of course, you could settle for wishbone stew for 5 cents. Anyway, these are our heroes. Boney is sort of a grayish dog. I guess you might call him a Weimaraner, but not. He doesn't totally fit the breed, but he's a big gray dog with floppy ears and a short tail. Well, Wolfgang is a brown German Shepherd, and they're active though. They're active like a lot of today's people. They get in their exercise too, and so every day after the breakfast crowd and the lunch crowd, they go out and behind the deli, and they have a jump rope there, and they do jump ropes for their exercise, and they have jump rope songs. I won't give those away, but there's a couple of good jump rope songs in the book. But everything was running along normally in this dusty little town until Saturday, when everyone gathers to watch the stagecoach arrive. And it arrives in a cloud of dust, and a bunch of upset stagecoach drivers and sidekicks on there yelling, "We've been robbed! We've been robbed! The Raccoon Brothers stole the strongbox that was coming to the orphanage." "Oh no," cried the young widow. This is an attractive young English setter widow who runs the orphanage. She said, "Those were the bedtime snacks for the kids. What are we going to do now? Someone should get the sheriff." But the sheriff is out of town visiting his grandma in Sedona. So who's going to help out? Boney says to Wolfgang, "They're bad fellas. We've got to do something. Here's a list. Go to the general store, get this stuff, and meet me behind the corral, the horse corral tonight." Wolfgang goes out and comes back that night with 2 fast horses and a mask for Boney and an Indian headdress for himself as disguises. They don't really want the hero worship that goes with this, so they're kind of try to be anonymous. And they were fresh out of lassos. He wanted some lassos to tie these robbers up, but they'll have to use their jump ropes, so they bring those too. And of course, since they're deli men, and this is a kid's book, there's no guns around here. So they say, "Well, let's grab some hard salamis. That'll do the trick, and let's ride." And they thunder across the prairie. I won't go into now I'll leave you hanging there, because there has to be some resolution to this, and
of course.
And it happens in a couple different ways.
Smart man.
Anyway, that's the story, and so I got my Old West urge satisfied there, and the book came out really nice. It has some nice. It has the Badlands in it. They're on that map too, and they're just acres and acres of sandy soil with spiny cactus growing out of them. But that's where the robbers run to.
There you have it. Listen, people, I'm telling you, this is something you're going to want to embark upon, right? And he's a smart man for not giving it all away, because you know what you got to do. You got to purchase your copies. There's no getting around it, okay? Next question that I'd love to get into, Frank, and thank you very much for the brief synopsis that you've given. I want to cover inspiration, because, I think it's safe to assume where this came from, because, again, I know you're like me, right? You grew up watching these Wild Wild West stories. You probably, as a kid, imagined being in one of them, as did I. But I want to hear it from you. What inspired you to write this particular narrative?
Well, it is, of course, nostalgia for the old, ranger shows, the Lone Ranger, and I can't have the music that went with it, because that was really inspiring too. It was the William Tell Overture, and gosh, every kid knew that in the neighborhood because of watching these westerns. But that was my inspiration. I also wanted to I had done, just at that period in the 90s when this first book was released, I had done a few books that mostly had kids in them in various situations, and with and without their families and so on. But I like to draw animals. I always have liked that. And so I said to myself, I have to have this town populated by animals. So I chose dogs. Everyone seems to love dogs, and it would take, I won't have to, conjure up these gritty Western characters. I'll just make them dogs. Mm-hmm. Even the orphans are just random dogs. Although two of them do show up early in the book. Two of the orphans are holding hands. They've got a nickel in their paw, and Wolfgang, not Wolfgang, but Boney, the owner is carefully dividing a pickle in half for them, because he's using the top of a barrel that's on the barrel that says a nickel for a pickle, and so he's dividing in half for these orphan twins. They've got a nickel between them to spend. But it was just a love of the Old West and those things, and I want to get back to doing more animals. So that sometimes that happens in different ways, because shortly after doing this book, a book I had done in between doing other books was called Froggy Gets Dressed, and it had taken off. It was by Jonathan London, a very good, very prolific, and he loves wildlife and writes a lot of stories about wildlife, but this was more of a funny story about a frog wanting to get dressed and go out and play in the snow, and his folks telling him, go back to sleep. Don't you know frogs are supposed to sleep all winter? But no, not him. And every time he emerges from the house, he's not properly dressed, and his mother calls him Froggy, and he says, what? And she calls him back, and he takes all his clothes off and puts those pants on that he forgot, and puts them all back on and goes out. This happens about 4 times, and in the end he seems to be perfectly dressed, and his mother calls him one last time, and he can't understand what's wrong, what could be missing. He goes over his whole inventory, and then she yells, your underwear, and the kids all love. It's a good responsive reading book, and I can get them all yelling your underwear real loud in their schoolroom, and they love that. But it spawned a whole line of Froggy books. There are now over 30 of them, and Froggy has actually taught people to swim, and he's played soccer. He's played miniature golf with his father on Father's Day, and a lot of other things. Mm-hmm. So I like this Western book got me back into doing animals, and so I was thankful for that. Well, the subject of animals reminds me of an older story. Some of my first days out of art school, and working for an ad agency. One that provided artists for advertising, and they had given a man an assignment there to draw new animals for the animal cracker box. And he had drawn the lion and tiger have to be laying down because they're under Barnum's Animals, a big sweeping bunch of lettering for the Nabisco animal cracker box. And he made the lion asleep as a proposal. And Nabisco said, no way, we don't want a sleeping lion on our animal cracker box. And so the agency turned to me and said, Frank, do a lion real fast. For God's sakes, don't make him sleeping. And they took it over to Nabisco, and they said, that's more like it. Give him the job. So back in the mid 60s, 66, I did the animal cracker box, replaced all the animals in that cage on the cages on that box with my artwork, and it lasted over 20 years.
Wow.
So I was really pleased with that. And to me, it was just a job at the time, but I found after a while I would be having book signings, and mothers and grandmothers would be coming in with animal cracker boxes and saying, sign this too. We heard that you did this. And I thought, wow, someone's doing good publicity for me. And I would be signing animal cracker boxes. But anyway, got my fill of animals.
Frank, listen, people, could we have selected the more perfect embodiment of a person of distinction to be on our network? I mean, my goodness. I love what I'm hearing here, and so many fantastic accomplishments. My next question that I want to get into, let's focus a little bit more on your writing background. Now, I know a lot of your background is in illustration, and this really could play for artistry across the board. But I do think that it's very poignant to discuss as an artist, or if you'd like to take it from a writing perspective, totally up to you. But Frank, how do you handle self-doubt and maintain confidence in your either A, writing abilities, if you'd like to focus on that, or just in your artistry in general?
Well, that's a good question. And I mean, it's sort of a cliche, but as many people know, if you work in the arts, you're going to meet with rejection a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
And I know I answer that question with a lot of when I'm presenting to schoolrooms full of kids, and say, don't think of them as they're not rejecting you. They can't reject you and pull you off the face of the earth as being not fit or anything. You're okay. It's the piece of paper you write on. It's what you wrote that they're rejecting, or it's what you drew that they're rejecting. And you can do it again. You can try and do it better. You can take it and show it to someone with better taste. But it's not yourself that they're rejecting. Mm-hmm. So always think of it that way. Look for that person with better taste.
That's great advice. That's great advice because, listen, as an artist, we can all relate, right? Our artistry, again, whether you're a painter, an actor, or writer, it doesn't matter. Art is art. And as an artist, when we are creating when we're perfecting our craft, it becomes very sensitive to us, right? It becomes almost like children that we've given birth to. And that is a relatable feeling in terms of that fear of rejection, that fear of failure. So it's wonderful advice that you gave there because, listen, at the end of the day, people remember it's not your work that they're rejecting. Like Frank said, that's fantastic advice to just keep it moving. That's wonderful. Frank, next question, and really diving down the rabbit hole here with this one. But if you could enter the world of the book that you've written, which page would you land on and why?
Oh, that's a good one. I don't know. Well, it makes me think of this other book that I wrote just a little before The Bone Stranger, and it had a rather wealthy family in it, and a little young boy named Edmund, and his best friend was Harris. Now, Harris is a parrot, and he is a very clever parrot. He taught the parrot all sorts of tricks. He could stand on his head. He could ride a croquet ball around the course. But best of all, they loved doing color flashcards. And the harder Edward would tap on the flashcard, the louder the parrot would yell out the color. He'd tap on yellow, he'd go yellow. He'd tap on orange, and he'd go orange. And he'd tap harder on the red one, and he'd go red. And so they were proud of that. They had done the whole color wheel except for purple, when a fierce windstorm sucked the parrot out the parlor window. And I think I would have liked to have been in that situation then, because the boy was grief-stricken, took to his bed. Mama rented or auditioned lots of parents from a talent agency, but they could all do all sorts of things, but none of them could do color flashcards. So the father took a wad of cash and said to the chauffeur, they have a chauffeur, and they have a stretch limo. It's a long black thing. And he said, take the car and go find that parrot. He's the only one that can do the whole color wheel except for purple. And hearing this, Edmund jumped out of bed, grabbed a bowl of soup real fast and a croissant, and got his flashcards, jumped in the car with the chauffeur, and they went off on a global search for the missing parrot. So I would like to have gone on that search with them, because they went everywhere. They went through towns and cities. The Amazon, they got that stretch limo on the Amazon River on a log raft. And by the way, that book is going to be available from the same source as The Bone Stranger, because that's a re-release too. It's called The Last Time I Saw Harris.
Frank, as we close out of this fantastic interview, man, and listen, I know myself, I am at the edge of my seat, and I could sit here and I could talk to you for hours, okay? I have that many questions I'd like to ask. I'm that much engulfed in the conversation we're having, but I got to keep reminding myself, like, Benji, this is not about you, okay? So as we hone it in, and as we close out here, we have discussed so much information today. But is there anything that we haven't yet touched up on that you really want to make sure our listening audience is aware of?
These two books are not going to be in the Barnes & Noble or that. They're only going to be online. They're at youronlinepublicist.com, youronlinepublicist, CIST.com. And they're available, though, in three forms. There's a hardcover if you want something for a gift or a keepsake, and there's a paperback, and there is at the low end of the cost, there's a ebook. It could be an ebook, and it could be on your device.
Yeah.
So that's where to get them.
There you have it.
But anyway, thank you for this interview and giving me a chance to vent and to relive some of the better moments of my life. And it was a pleasure.
Well, Frank, truly, the pleasure was all ours, okay? What I love so much about this, not only are they just fantastic narratives and wonderful journeys to embark upon, but for me personally, I think there's something to be said about just being in your imagination and allowing, because listen, I know that these are children's narratives. Of course, people head out there, pick up your copies, allow your children to embark upon the journey, read them to your children and embark upon it with them. But me, my background is in filmmaking. So as a filmmaker, as an actor, I live in my imagination. And I think that there is something to be said about that, right? About just allowing yourself to just imagine, right? Allowing yourself to be a child again, allowing that child inside to come out. Because I think so often with just the pressures of everyday living, as we grow and as we become adults, so often we forget about that child inside, right? We forget about what it was like to just live in our imaginations. And your books capture that. It allows your readers to embark upon that in a fun, safe way. There's so much to be had here. Again, the pleasure is truly all ours. People, I'm going to say it for you one last time. The main title that we focused on today was called The Bone Stranger. Make sure that you're getting the newest edition. And of course, you have Frank Remkiewicz to thank for it. There's so much here to get lost in. Simply Google his name. Google Froggy. You're going to be greeted with a plethora of creations that this man has developed. And you can thank me later because this is something you're going to want to embark upon. Frank, this has been a true pleasure, an absolute delight. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. You let my inner child be on the radio.